everybody. It's Nick McNaboe. I'm with Greene of Greene Creative, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. I look forward to introducing Fred to you guys. We've got a lot of fun things to talk about today, and I look forward to sharing them with you. Like if somebody were to come to you and say, "Hey, like this is what we've got going on. We need to create some content for it, but we've got our marketing channel set up. We need some direction because." Two realtors going out and providing and doing something is just going to be, a little organic and might show up something, but it's not efficient. Like having like a firm like yours to come in and really direct a business's efforts to create targeted content that presents their vision. Is that something that you guys I'm just trying to organically come up with what you guys are up to?
Well, my first question would always be, who's your target audience? Who are you trying to communicate with? Let's find out, once we define who that is, then let's figure out what is their medium of choice. Do they prefer podcasts? Do they prefer videos? I don't even suggest do they prefer reading blogs, because I don't think anybody's reading blogs anymore because of the amount of video that's available and the amount of podcasts that have podcasting's exploded during COVID. We want to find what's the best way to communicate with that audience. What's the message you want to get across? I don't want to know what your mission statement is, because to me, mission statements are more internal in nature. It's like, what is the message that you want to convey to your client? What do you want your client to be the first thing that they think about when they think of you? Mm-hmm. How do we get that message across?
Right.
The second thing we'll talk about is, once we define who the audience is we talk about the production triangle. And because you mentioned triangle a minute ago. So the production triangle is good, quick, and cheap. And as the client, you get to pick two. Mm-hmm. If you want it good and quick, it ain't going to be cheap. If you want it quick and cheap, it may not be that good.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to figure out what it is that you want to do. And because, in my experience, smaller clients don't necessarily, their question is, oh, I have to pay for that? Yeah, you do if you want that done. And my wife and I met working in rock and roll radio in San Francisco in the 70s. So anything that you can think about is basically true, that if you can come up with your imagination.
Yeah.
But we both come from content creation and storytelling. And that's what we do. We tell stories. And that's what we try to figure out for our client, is what the story is they want to tell and how they want it. Not necessarily how they want to tell it. We help them shape that story, and then we'll put that together.
That's fantastic. What are some of the more fun projects that you've worked on that you're like, okay, we're getting into this, and then next thing you know, you're like, we get to call this work?
Yeah, well, that's been my entire career.
Yeah.
I've always figured out a way. I've been self-employed since 1986. I said I came from a radio background. I worked in radio in San Francisco. I was production director of some major radio stations in San Francisco. And then I went out on my own in 1986, and I was in sports marketing for 20 years. I had created a concept that took off, and I got 20 years out of it. But my career has always been about, what am I most passionate about? How can I make money doing it? So it started in the late 80s. It was radio. And then after that, when I went into sports, I'm a huge baseball fan. And so I went to, I created an interactive attraction for baseball that ended up being sponsored by Anheuser-Busch. And it was in 14 major league stadiums and 5 NBA arenas and 4 NHL arenas. And then I started doing variations of it, and worked at the Super Bowl for 16 years. So I've always found a way of making my passion my work. So I've never had the issue of going, oh my God, I get paid to do this, because I'm only going to do stuff that that I love doing. And so it's storytelling. And now, right now the primary focus is podcast work.
Yeah.
I started my own podcast 16 years ago in 2005, well before anybody had heard what a podcast was or iTunes. As a matter of fact, it was 2 years before the iPhone came out. And I'm still doing that podcast every week. But during COVID, podcasting exploded at the second big wave. The podcast is called Golf Smarter. And it's, I don't talk about the PGA Tour. I don't cover what's happening in next week's event or last week's event, because to me that's old news, especially with podcasting. The work that I do in my podcasting is evergreen content. So that episode number 1, which I published in 2005, was about an interview with the author of Zen Golf, about the mental game of golf. Well, that episode is just as valid today in 2021 as it was in 2005. So that's the kind of content I do. I interview golf instructors. It's about game improvement and golf lifestyle,
Awesome.
and storytelling. And I get people to tell stories. Just recently on the show, I've featured conversations with Bobby Jones' grandson. And if you know golf at all, you've heard the name Bobby Jones.
Yeah.
I interviewed Arnold Palmer's playing partner for 15 years. Recently interviewed somebody who lives locally that was Gerald Ford's caddy. John Rahm is one of the top players in the world right now. I just had his fitness coach on this week. Next week, I'm talking to Colin Morikawa, who went to Cal and has won 2 majors this year. I'm talking to his mental coach. So there's great stories in there and there's great learnings in there. So that to me is, how do I become a better golfer, is really the focus on the show. And it communicates on a different kind of level to amateur golfers worldwide. And it's been a tremendous amount of fun doing it. And I just do it because I love doing it. And I keep going. I've over 800 episodes now. My YouTube channel for Golf Smarter TV on YouTube is our podcast episodes, but I also have unique videos that I'll produce. I'm working on one right now that I went paragliding when I was in Los Angeles, and I thought it would be fun to put it up on there. But I'll do test different things, do different things on the golf course, give different tips, share different tips that I've learned. That I'm not giving lessons on mechanics. It's more about playing golf and being a golfer than hitting a golf ball. Absolutely. So if I were to advise you on where to start with Golf Smarter, and this is based on the feedback I've received from listeners, I would start with the most recent and work your way backwards, looking at the titles and see what intrigues you. And, if all goes well, you'll like the host of the show and you'll kind of get hooked into his personality, me, and you'll go from there.
Well, I look forward to it. Fred, it's really been great. I'm glad we finally got together, and
thank you, Nick.
I got to hear a lot more in depth about who you are as a person and what you do in the community.
Then check out episode 800 of Golf Smarter, because for the very first time I talked about myself. I was interviewed by a golf instructor who's been on the show many times, and we've become friends over the years. And he interviewed me. And because a listener wrote in and said, how about for episode 800, we hear about what you've learned doing the podcast. So if you want to know more about me, that would be a good place to start too. Episode 800 from July 6, 2021.
Oh, I look forward to it. Well, again, I'm Nick McNaboe with M&M Bay Area. Fred Greene from Greene Creative. Looking really forward to
and Golf Smarter.
And your Golf Smarter podcast. I'm all over that stuff. And if I end up becoming a better golfer for it, I'll treat you to a round of golf, and I can prove it to you.
You're on.
I love it. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.